welcome to the Pursuit of Healthiness podcast. I'm your host, Winona van Delft. I'm a health and mindset coach, spaghetti and ice cream lover, travel junk, and a cat mom. I love conversations that are on a more raw and deeper level. And today I have with me Joni Bennett. She's a trauma therapist and emotion regulation expert. She takes her years of experience as a licensed mental health psychotherapist into the mainstream. She's helping people learn to live the best life by breaking through negative beliefs and learning to be fully present with their emotions. So as you can guess, today's episode is all about emotions and overcoming trauma and just working through all of that. Welcome, Joni, to my podcast. How is everything today?
Oh, going very well. Got a little sunshine peeking between the clouds and enjoying the day.
Oh, that's amazing. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, a little bit of your story, where you come from.
So I am a trauma specialist, a licensed therapist, and emotion regulation expert in the central United States. I've been working as a therapist in the mental health world since I finished grad school in 2015 and have just really developed an expertise and a passion for helping people learn to regulate their emotions in an effective way. Oftentimes when people struggle chronically with things like emotions that are very extreme or having intense reactions to things that might upset anybody, but they feel, more upset and stay upset for longer and take longer to calm down. I'm able to help those people find center and find a balance and find a way to move forward into their lives without their emotions getting in their way. And so I'm just really passionate about helping people live their best life through gaining control over their emotional bodies. Yeah.
So how important are emotions really?
Well, the emotions really are just another part of our nervous system. So asking that question is a lot like asking how important is your brain, or how important is your cardiovascular system, or how important are your bones? You couldn't live without any of those pieces working efficiently, right? Working effectively. So emotions are vitally important. In some cultures, and in the United States particularly, we see a lot of disregard for emotions, and we're kind of facing a cultural overturn of how do we start to be present with and own our emotional selves in a way that is that's healthy, because many people chronically avoid or suppress or push down emotions. And the long-term effects on health are really present. It's much like, if you have cardiovascular disease, if your blood pressure is high and you're experiencing that strain over a long period of time, your body's going to break down. The same thing happens with our emotional bodies.
Exactly. So how does that work? Like, what are the physical and mental aspects of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think about the year that we've all been through with COVID-19 moving around the globe. It's created a higher level of emotional stress for many of us, right?
Yeah,
We've been isolated from loved ones. We've been working in very different ways and having to figure out on the fly how to do our jobs effectively. And people are seeing things like just increasing levels of stress and burnout where it's almost impossible to enjoy anything. I can't tell you the number of people that I've talked to that just describe like a flatness in everything that they do, everything that they feel. And when you can no longer experience positive emotions like you used to, then what are you living for, right?
Yeah, true. It
What are you
feels like
getting up
that.
for? Yeah. What are you making plans for? And what plans can you make? Because we're stuck at home. We're isolated from others.
That's the point.
So that's one effect, is flattened emotional state. It actually, and being under prolonged emotional stress can impact your nervous system in other ways, where it causes heart trouble. Like, it contributes to heart trouble. It contributes to weight gain. When your emotions aren't effectively managed and when you're not fully present with them, your cortisol levels are going to go up. That's a stress hormone that makes you feel more stressed out, and then also impacts your health in many other negative ways. So it's just a ripple effect into many parts of your life.
Yeah. So what if you have that flat feeling? Because I can imagine some listeners, or maybe all of them, um, are feeling that way. That feeling of what's the point? Like, why should I even make plans, or why should I even live at this point? Why? What does it matter? What can we do to improve our lives in that way?
Oh gosh, it's such a full question.
I know.
Do we have
We have
can we do a
time.
math class together? Yeah. So one of my go-to exercises is the practice of just core mindfulness in our day-to-day life, in moment-to-moment living. So oftentimes in the world that we exist in, our attention is moving like 800 directions at once, right?
Yeah.
We've got our phones, messenger apps are up, computers in front of us. The TV might be on for background noise. Maybe we're listening to a podcast and trying to focus on what we're doing in front of us and just tell ourselves we need that distraction. One of the very first things that I always have people do is simplify, turn down the noise. Now, the problem here, when we say turn down all those distractions, a lot of people will describe, but wait a minute, then I have to be present with myself. And what I feel there in that moment is terrifying and overwhelming. And I have no idea how to cope with it. And it feels
Yeah.
like it's just going to flood me and it's never going to stop. I'm like, it's okay. What happens when we chronically distract ourselves and we have these really high levels of stress that have created that emotional flatness? It's like your emotions are a pressurized can of air or a pressurized barrel of water. And there's a little valve on the end of that spout, picture like a keg with a valve on it. And when you very first go to crack that valve open, it is going to be an explosive burst of water or steam because
Yeah.
it's been under so much pressure and it's going to feel a lot. But then as you continue to turn down the noise and as you begin to make a practice of slowing down and being present just with yourself without all the distractions, that pressure level comes down and your emotions are going to regulate themselves a little bit. So this is not an overnight fix. There's no like light switch to turn off
Yeah.
when you're feeling that flattened state where, it's just you're not enjoying anything. But we have to begin the practice of eliminating distractions so that our emotions get the attention that they need.
Yeah.
One of
So,
the Oh yeah.
yeah, no, just go ahead.
Oh yeah. I was just going to say one of the ways that I think about emotions is they are an alarm system. They're meant to signal us. They're meant to tell us that something needs attention.
Yeah.
And so think about it. If you're constantly ignoring the fire alarm that's going off and that fire alarm is just blaring and blaring and blaring, and maybe it's getting louder and what's happening? The room is filling up with smoke and you're just ignoring it. You're just like, no, I don't want to hear you. Just keep doing your thing. I'm going to turn up my music and put on my headphones and just stop functioning. That's how emotions work. When we address the cause, when we go and turn off the fire alarm and clear the smoke out and put out the fire, then we don't need that emotion to be really strong anymore. So that's the practice that we have to do, is turn into the emotion instead of turning away from it.
So how can we do that? Because I know a lot of people say that like you need to work inwards, but it's so much more difficult than it really is. So if you have all those thoughts running in your head when you put down the noise, all those yeah, as I said, those thoughts, fears, like anything that's going on inside your head, how do you actually do it? Like what are the things that you need to do?
Yeah. So one of the things I hear you describing that comes up often is like anxiety, racing thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just worries,
Yeah.
the stuff that when you turn down the noise, then the noise in your head is just there and it's all consuming. An exercise that's really effective, and there's been a lot of research done on it actually showing that it helps reduce anxiety and worry long term, is the use of a worry journal. So what this looks like is you set aside a certain amount of time in your day. Maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes. Kind of gauge the size of your worries for where you need to start. You're going to adjust day by day.
Yeah.
And you set a timer. And for that amount of time, you are going to physically write on paper all of those thoughts as fast as you can. And you're going to let yourself catastrophize. You're going to let yourself go to worst case scenario. You're going to go through everything that's in your head and get as much as you can of it on paper and just let it out of your brain. When your timer goes off, you have to stop. You stop, and that's when maybe you go on and you go back to your distractions, or you do something to turn your mind to something else, and you work to control your mind and to not let it worry outside of that block of time.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you may run out of worries before your timer goes off. You have to use the whole time. That's a very important thing. If you're out of thoughts and you've still got 3 minutes left on your timer, go back through your list and rewrite stuff. Think, okay, what's the most important one? Rewrite stuff. And then the next day, adjust your time down a little bit. Or maybe you get down to the end of your time and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much more. I can't possibly stop.
Yeah.
Give yourself 10 more minutes and then try. So adjust your time based on how much you need. Doing this on a regular basis, where you're basically creating a mental container for worry, will tell your brain, hey, I'm going to look at that fire alarm. I'm going to pay attention to what you really want me to focus on. So your brain stops having to insert it into all parts of your life. It stops having to shove it in front of you. When you're trying to focus on work, or when you're spending time with your kids, or when you're wanting to enjoy a nice meal, because your brain knows, hey, I'm going to give this attention this evening at 6 o'clock for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's a really effective practice for reducing worry thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good thing. It's like a brain dump, right? It's what they often call it.
Yeah.
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 So I know some people who have that and are feeling that, and they have the feeling that they cannot enjoy anything anymore. They cannot, or they don't know they have a passion, because some people say, you need to find distraction, or you need to find a passion or a hobby. But if you don't know what it is, like how do you do that? How do you start figuring out all of that?
So, it's interesting you bring that up, because I have a theory. A lot of us have kind of experienced a little bit of pandemic shame this year of not having found that passion or hobby. It's like, wow, I'm home. I have all this time. Why haven't I learned to knit, or,
Yeah.
started making bread like I see on Instagram? Here's the reality. A lot of times, before we can build interest in something that we enjoy, we have to address what we're not attending to within ourselves. So I think the first step in building a passion and building a hobby is actually feeling okay with yourself. And that's something that I do as a life coach and as a therapist, is I help people discover what it means to radically accept themselves, to be completely present in a way that doesn't judge, that isn't self-critical, that is fully present with loving kindness. Once we learn to do that, the hobbies will start to flow, your interests will start to flow. But the other thing is, when you're exhausted from just the daily life of trying to manage the stress of the present moment, I kind of have the question, like, should you have room for a passion? Should you have interest in a hobby? It's normal to not want to do extra things when we're in a really stressful period of life. And it doesn't matter if that's a pandemic, or job changes, or having a child, or, conflict with your partner. If there's a high level of stress in your life, you're not supposed to have the energy to go invest in new things. So, one of the things that I really think is important is helping people normalize it's okay to get home and feel like you want to go crash on the couch and binge Netflix for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Make sure you feed yourself, treat yourself like a houseplant, feed yourself water and rest. And it is okay to have periods of life that go by in that state of rest.
Yeah. So it is okay to just rest, or to sleep a lot in those times, right? Or do you
Absolutely.
say, like, maybe you could do something different?
Absolutely. I look at balance versus extremes. So often we push ourselves and think, I should be exercising more and I would feel better. That may be true. Maybe you need a little bit of exercise and movement to help boost yourself up. But if you're not able to exercise, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. A lot of what I do is around listening to our inner wisdom and learning to tune in with, what does your body need in this moment? It might be exercise. You might need to invest in a passion and find something that you enjoy doing. But all too often, I think the answer is we need to listen to our need to slow down.
Yeah.
We live in a very busy world. When I work with teenagers, like they are all anxious and stressed and overwhelmed. And I'm like, okay, what does your week look like? And they rattle off like 50 different commitments and activities, and they have homework. Like, holy
Yeah.
cow. Like, of course you're anxious and stressed and overwhelmed. Slow down. You have to slow down, or, you just don't have endless reserves of energy.
Yeah, but how can you slow down? Because I sometimes has the feeling that I cannot slow down. Because when I try to rest and take a step back, I am still with my head with work, for example, like, but I want to do. It's not that I have a feeling that I have to do it, but it's because I want to do it because it also gives me joy, but I also know that I need to take a step back. And I think a lot of business owners experience that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think one of the questions that I look at is, what does it look like to be productive and to be investing time in your business? Does it mean that you have to roll out content every single day? Do you have to be a machine that's producing stuff? Do you have to, follow your content calendar and check the boxes every single day? And then I ask, what's the worst thing that happens if 2 or 3 days go by and you do nothing?
Yeah, nothing.
What happens, right?
Yeah, it happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens regularly. And reminding ourselves that we exist in a state of rhythm. All throughout human history, humans have attuned to moon cycles and to seasons for growing crops and living. And for some reason, in this technological age, we feel like we should be going all the time. Like, even if it's a balanced schedule where I have mindfulness practice in the morning and I eat well, and then I do some work that I enjoy, and then the hobbies in the afternoon, and then I go to bed at a good time. You're not supposed to do that every single day. We kind of have like a pathological addiction or a pathological urge to do routine. Like, oh, I need to have a routine. I need to have habits and I need to stick to it. That's not how human beings work. Human beings have rhythms where they feel more energized and more ready to get up and do the things that you love. And then
Yeah.
they have rhythms where they slow down. And so, looking at yourself with compassion, and instead of asking yourself or telling yourself, I should be doing this. Why don't I have the energy to do this thing I love today? Oh, I need to make sure I should do the laundry and get everything caught up tonight. Instead, asking, what do I need in this moment? And then listening for an answer, not giving
Yeah.
yourself an answer, not thinking it out, listening to your body. What do I need in this moment? And then following that. This
Yeah.
is what it looks like to slow and pause. Sometimes you're going to have tons of energy and it's going to move and flow, so fast. And then other times your body's going to say, rest, go binge Netflix, go
Yeah.
be chill. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really good to work around that, I would say. Like if you figured out when you are most productive, do the stuff back then. And I think when we are talking about moon cycles, I think for women, a period is a really great example for it. Like sometimes in a month, you are really energized, you are productive, and other days, you're not. And I think if you figure that out for yourself and listen to your body, then if you work around that, even with food, if you eat certain foods during the month or during the week, then I think that will have a lot of impact on your body as well, and on your state of mind and your emotions and everything else.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely, it does. And what you do as a wellness expert helps women and people align with that.
Yeah.
Um, and one piece I would add is, you're talking about identifying your rhythms and pushing into them, which is perfect. In addition to that, releasing the pressure when your rhythms don't work exactly like you expect them to. I think we need to do a better job of releasing expectations as a whole. Like, be aware, be mindful, take in information and observe what's happening. You're going to get to know yourself and your needs better, but then also adopt a beginner's mind or a curious mind, as if every time that you observe something, it's the first time you've ever seen it. And it's amazing the things that you'll learn about yourself when you step into that state of, you may have tracked your cycle, 100 times over years of time. But when you step into a beginner's mind and you act as if you've never seen it before, you're going to find new information.
Yeah.
So taking a beginner's mind towards towards our energy levels might really change what you're doing for your daily habits.
It's like being a kid,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
Just
Everything's new.
yeah, kids are so amazing in that way. Like everything amazes them, and because it is truly the first thing or the first time that they see something, um, it's just amazing. Like kids can admire just the simplest things, and I think we forget that as adults
Yeah.
because we're so used to things. So even for me, that where I'm living right now on the Canary Islands, in the beginning, everything was special. I was like, "Ooh, palm trees, ooh, the ocean, ooh, the mountains." And I find myself these days more, I wouldn't say that I have to force myself to think that way, because sometimes I can be really in the present and feel gratitude about where I live and the beautiful trees. But it gets more difficult because you are used to it. Um, but no, I think we, yeah, as I said, I wouldn't say force, because force has a little bit of a negative load on the word. But we should just try to be more curious and mindful of all the things that we have around us, because it is beautiful and it is amazing.
I saw something once, maybe it was a Rumi quote, I don't remember for sure, but it was never lose the delight that comes with the sight of the cream mixing in the coffee. And just that image of the swirling galaxies as you pour cream into a cup
Yeah,
of black liquid. And that has always stuck with me. Now, every time I put cream in my coffee, I just stop and I watch. Like, oh, look at that. There's a whole galaxy forming right there before it blends.
yeah. But it looks amazing though. It's just like, yeah, no, it looks good. Um, so I want to go back to emotions. What are the most important things that we need to know about our emotions?
So, as we've already kind of briefly touched on, emotions are vital to your nervous system, and they are signals, they are messengers, they mean something. So if you feel anger, that's an emotion that prepares you to fight, prepares you for action, prepares you to move forward. If you feel sadness, it's preparing you for stillness, preparing you for quiet. Fear prepares you to run away, to escape, to avoid something that could be painful or dangerous, right?
Yeah,
And we could go through, shame and disgust and joy, happiness, all these, every emotion that a human has a capacity to experience means something to our nervous system. So, when we're out of touch with emotions, we're missing all of those messages. Just like not catching the beauty of the palm trees or the cream in the coffee, we're missing things that our body is communicating to us that are potentially vital to our survival and are definitely vital to our well-being.
yeah,
The longer that you avoid those things, the more your nervous system will get out of balance. And so it either turns the volume up so that you feel more, and maybe you're feeling a level of fear that's inappropriate to the situation, or you get cut off in traffic and you have intense road rage that's not appropriate or safe for the situation, or you feel far less and you get to that numb, zoned out, dissociated feeling because we're not responding to our emotions as they're meant to be responded to. Um, let's see, what else is important about emotions? Um, oh, I know everybody that's listening probably experiences like wanting to feel what we would consider positive emotions like joy, and not wanting to feel what we consider bad emotions
yeah.
like sadness. Uh, Something that I think is really important to remember is that emotions are not inherently good or bad ever. We're
Yes, I
supposed
love
to
that
feel.
you say that. Yeah,
Yes, yes. So if you start to release some expectation of good or bad and stop trying to avoid difficult emotions, you'll actually get healthier quickly.
yeah,
Uh, it's like, if you want your body to be healthier and you start working out, you have to experience the pain, right? You have to have the cramps,
the
next to
soreness, yeah.
yeah, or yeah, it's just part of it to experience that difficulty. We have to experience difficult emotions to be emotionally healthy. And when we work really hard to avoid the painful ones, but feed into the positive ones, again, it's just setting your system off balance. We're not coming into equilibrium.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's also because a lot of people are saying, just be positive, stay positive. And it is difficult to stay positive all the time, and all the other emotions are valid as well. As you said, like there is no negative or positive emotion. Like they all mean something, and we need
Right.
to listen to them.
Right. And it's not only is it difficult to stay in a positivity mindset all the time, it's actually incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah.
Um, it'd be like it's like extreme diets where was it the Atkins diet that was all meat, and it came out like years later, the founder of it like ended up dying prematurely because his body like basically shut down on itself because it
Yeah.
was so bad to do, to just consume meat in that extreme. Anything that you do in an extreme isn't good. And so I have a lot of issue with overwhelming positivity language because it's just an unhealthy expectation that you should
Yeah.
be happy all the time. Contentment actually comes up when we are accepting of all emotions, including sadness, including grief. Contentment will rise when you're able to be present with all of those. And then with your contentment, what happens? We have authentic joy. Instead of having to force happiness, instead of having to really strive to turn our mind to positive things, we start to experience authentic peace, and
Yeah.
peace at a soul level.
That feels amazing.
Does. That's
But
pretty wonderful.
how can we try to accept the so-called bad emotion? Because we are so wired to shut them down that we should only be happy or be quiet, or I don't know.
Going back to the exercise we talked about earlier, which is worry journal, but then turning down distractions, coupling that with the beginner's mind principle. Like, what happens if you step back and you just look at your emotions for what they are without evaluating them, without recognizing, oh, this is my interpretation about it? What if you just look at what you're feeling in your physical body as you experience that sadness or that anger or that fear? And what if you start to take inventory of what's happening physically, of what your thoughts are doing, and of how intense the feeling itself is? um, as you get curious, instead of being judgmental and pushing it away, you'll collect information and become more familiar with it. There is there's a really powerful example that comes from the work of Jane Goodall with gorillas in the heart of sub-Saharan Africa. So she researched these families of gorillas over decades, right?
Yeah.
She spent years of her life getting closer and closer to these completely wild gorillas, and eventually was able to research them within their family units. Like, she would sit and share meals with them and do mutual grooming. And I remember when I was a kid, I was fascinated by the documentaries on her work. It was just really cool. But I love to think of Jane's work in the context of getting close to difficult emotions that we're used to avoiding. So Jane didn't just march into the jungle one day and walk up to the biggest silverback and say, "Hello, I would like to be a part of your family. Could I please join you for dinner tonight?" Because he would have smashed her skull in, and that would have been the end of the research, right?
Yeah.
Jane spent years getting just close enough to the pod of gorillas that they noticed her. That's as close as she got. She didn't go any further. Just close enough that they noticed her, that they looked in her direction. And then she would stop and she would wait. And then the next day she might step a little closer, and she might get a little closer to them before they noticed her, because they're looking for threats in their environment. So they'd see her. "Oh, are you a threat?" They'd observe, but then eventually, no, okay, she's not a threat. So they'd go back to their business. And she spent, days, weeks, months, years creeping in that manner. And sometimes she went a little too far. and the silverback would puff up, and he would be in an aggressive posture, and she would step back further away. That's the practice that I lead people through in how to get close to difficult emotions. Don't think about it as, rushing into the middle of your deepest, darkest anger and your deepest, darkest grief. Think of it as you want to turn the corner of your eye and just start to observe in a really casual way. And maybe it's while you still have some distractions going. You just start to notice. And then the next time you push a little bit deeper into that and you go just until it gets uncomfortable. And then you stay in that place for just a moment, observing that discomfort, and then you go back to what you're doing. Then a little bit later, you turn and you look again. What's that sadness doing now? What's that grief doing now? And you might step in a little bit further and you might take a deep, full breath, noticing that discomfort while you're paying attention. But then you go on about your day. So think of Jane and the gorillas. This isn't a charge into the middle of, oh, today I want to be present with my emotions and feel contentment and peace.
Yeah.
Work yourself into that presence.
I love that you say that. It's really great practice, actually, if you do it like that. So what is the biggest thing that you've learned, your biggest lesson?
With my own emotions, or?
Yeah, no, just in general. Emotions, with your practices, anything.
Yeah. I think one of the most life-changing lessons that I've personally grasped and am still grasping is the belief that, or the assumption that nothing is good or bad. All things simply are.
Yes, that is beautiful.
When we stop evaluating and we start just looking at facts, like, the possibilities become endless really quick.
Yeah, that's true. I have thought about it before, but saying you it again makes me realize, like, yeah, no, it truly is. And I think good and bad is, there's no such thing. It's really your perspective, and it's who you ask. And what I love to talk about with my partner, especially, we talk a lot, for example, wars. Like, we're so proud of the one who won the war, but it really depends on your perspective. Like, if the other country would have won, then you maybe will be happy for them or angry for the other side. It really, for example, the Second World War, we are now happy that Germany was defeated, but if they won, we would be in a completely different world, and then your perspective would be so different.
Right. Winners write the history books, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I think that good and bad are best described as constructs. Like, what's a construct? It's something we make up that helps us make sense of our world, right? We kind of need them to exist.
Yeah.
They're part of how a society functions. But, good and bad can be very different compared to who you're talking to.
And
so
that's emotions the same, right?
Yeah.
There's no good, there's no bad. They're just there to help us navigate life.
Exactly. They're as natural as breathing.
Yeah. So what if people want to work with you or want to learn more about this? Like, how can they contact you?
Yeah. The best way to reach me is just through jonibennett.com, JONIBENNETT.com. And there's an easy way to book a free consultation call there. Just you'll see the button. I don't have a lot of information on my website because I'm too busy actually working with people and helping them change their lives. So I encourage people, just schedule an exploratory call, and at the very least, we'll talk about tools that they can find locally to them for emotional wellness. But also, I offer individual coaching packages where we spend 3 months really doing a deep dive into what it means to be present in your emotions and what it means to become non-judgmental in the way that you see yourself and you see the world, and what it means to learn to practice these mindfulness skills in a way that allows you to experience increased peace and contentment. People often discover that, they have baggage in their lives and negative beliefs that they're able to release through their work with me. I also use a combination of EMDR therapy in my coaching practice so that we can really let your brain do the work for you. And that's a whole nother topic for another day of how EMDR
Yeah.
works. But that's, one of the things with being a licensed therapist as well as a life coach is I have a lot of tools and experience available to help people overcome some deeper difficulties. We didn't even touch on, the work that I do with trauma and how that impacts our nervous system and impacts our emotions. But suffice to say that, as a coach, they reach out to me, and I'm capable of helping with a lot of the deeper stuff that may be stopping them from experiencing emotional freedom.
Okay, that is amazing. And you mentioned before as well that you help teenagers, so it doesn't matter what age, right?
So as a coach, I only work with adults. Yeah, my work with teenagers has been primarily in the scope of my mental health practice locally.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's some liability reasons for that. I love working with teens, but got to make sure I can adequately supervise safety.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. Like I have a whole new perspective about this, even though I do my own research and I talk to a lot of different people about emotions, but you managed to give me new insights about this, or new realizations, I have to say, about this. So I really, really want to thank you for this conversation. And I'll leave everything in the description box so people can contact you. And yeah, I just want to say thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ananda. It's very good to meet with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did and learned something on how to deal with your emotions and your trauma, at least for a little bit. Of course, always seek help if you need that. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We are here to help you and guide you. Click the link in the description, and that's it. Talk to you next episode.